Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, Reeling in Holistic Health, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I'm your host, Coach Rice, and I want to make sure that you tune in every Monday at 8 a.m. Central Standard Time, where I have my special guest on to talk about real issues that matter most. I want you to check us out on YouTube, Facebook Live, on Business Facebook page, also on the Be Awesome Network. Stay tuned. I think you're going to really like this next guest. Happy Monday and welcome to Casting the Net, where we care about your mental health and well-being. I am your host, Coach Rice, and with me today I have a special guest. His name is Dr. Jeffrey Bone. He's a chronic illness coach, author, and a podcast host who helps people navigate psychological and emotional realities of living long-term illness and pain. We all need to learn about that because pain is a lot of people are experiencing that in their body. So Jeffrey, tell us, tell the audience where you're from and what is your story around why you chose this particular career?
Well, I'm from New York City. That's where I was born. But I've lived in New Jersey, North Carolina, South Carolina, Ohio, and California. And right now, I'm in Orange County, California. That's where I'm located. And my journey has been a journey of service to others and through the lens of mental health. For the past 2 decades, it's been about treating people with issues associated with the existential realities of living with a chronic illness. It can be chronic pain, it can be fibromyalgia, it can be POTS, it can be post-viral, whatever it may be. But that's my journey. But unfortunately, or fortunately, however we want to take it, about a decade ago, I developed my own chronic illness journey. And so I had been treating with people for a decade and treating their chronic illness stories. And then I developed mine. Essentially,
Wow.
what ended up happening, I was in my office, and the office is near the airport. And you can hear the planes taking off. I always said that's the sound of low overhead. Don't mind that. I'm just trying to keep it down. And unfortunately, that there was black mold. There's two different types of neurotoxic mold in the HVAC. The building had been turned over a few
Mm.
times and in the bankruptcy. And I developed something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome, where my body just flipped out. Feet felt like they were vibrating. It felt like a neurotoxic concussion. I couldn't
Mm.
remember people's names, and watching screens, I'd get nauseous. It was Christmas time. All the lights were just nauseating. Something was wrong.
Wow.
And so I'm going to all these different doctors trying to figure out this mess. Unfortunately, I don't really fall into their decision tree very nice and neat. So they would try to help me with some symptoms kind of here and there, but no one really had an answer until I ran into one individual, and he ran some blood work and did some things. And it's like, you know what? I think you have a mold issue. So what I ended up doing was I had an environmentalist test out my office, and yes, indeed, I had two different neurotoxic molds in that office. And then I treated, and even after I treated for about a year, I still wasn't feeling that great. And so then,
Mm.
and then it's like, you know what? I'm going to go to the Mayo Clinic. I'm going to go to the mothership, and it's got like maybe they've got something for me. But before I do, because we have some decent hospitals around me, I'm going to look at the hospital directory, and I'm going to see, is there a specialty that I haven't really kind of tried out yet? And the first one I came across was toxicology. And I'm like, you know what?
Mm.
I feel toxic. I feel toxic. I'm going to go there. So I talked to this gentleman, older gentleman, and he doesn't believe the mold issue. He doesn't believe that that can cause whatever. And it's like, I don't care. Just listen to me, help me out, give me a path. So he does take me seriously, and he tests my immunoglobulins, and my
Mm.
immunoglobulins come back low, clinically low. Something's wrong. Part of my immune system is not working. And then he sends me to the immunologist. The immunologist gives me a vaccine. A month later, I get the results. You do blood work, and my body didn't make antibodies to the vaccine. And so that means I have common variable immune deficiency. And now I have to infuse myself once a week with immunoglobulins. If you're wondering what that is, you hear people they donate blood, but they sometimes they donate plasma. When they
Yes.
donate plasma, they are kind of taking off those immunoglobulins, and then they kind of sterilize it and do everything that they do to kind of give it back to lots of individuals that use those immunoglobulins for various ailments. And I just so happen to be one of those individuals that uses immunoglobulins for once a week for my kind of trying to piece back my immune system. And there are some pieces like my IgM I cannot replace, and my body has never been the same after my illness. But the immunoglobulins do help. So basically, I fell down. I fell down big
Mm.
time. I had my existential collapse, and I needed to find a new story for my life because the old one shattered into a million pieces.
Wow. That's very interesting how something like mold can do so
Yes,
much damage to the body. And
absolutely.
it's interesting, you were actually working in the field of chronic illness.
I
And
was,
then,
yeah.
then
I
and then you
manifested it in the wrong way.
and you experience it.
Yes.
How did it change the way you coach?
It changed, it humbled my backside. It really gave me the appreciation. I always had it in my head because I never really believed that, like, oh, it's just all in the brain. Oh, it's just, we're just, it's always, just psychosomatic of that nature. I always believed, I'm kind of very humanistic that way. I always believed my individuals that I was working with, but it really gave me this humbleness and appreciation of these lived lives, because these individuals just don't come into this office and they just don't have this session. It's like they're living with this chronic illness when they're eating, when they're taking a bath, when they're using the restroom, when they're traveling in a car, when it's like it's everywhere, it's everything. It embodies their entire story, and that's what oftentimes gets missed. It's that sometimes you come in for those sessions and you go see the doctor and they'll refill that medication, they'll give you that shot, they'll do these different things to kind of quell the symptoms a little bit. But there's this story that's just completely different, completely foreign. The manual of life, which is already hard enough to figure out, completely got changed on you. And it's scary trying to figure out this unknown future that's unfolding in front of you. So I had tremendous, I don't think I've lacked empathy, but boy, did it up my empathy game in the appreciation of truly what the word chronic means.
Can you
Because
definitely tell the audience what does chronic truly mean?
it's like on paper they say like, oh, it's over 3 to 6 months, that the symptoms continue, and farther than the what's expected in terms of a resolution for a particular injury, like you sprained your ankle, you had surgery, whatever it may be. But chronic for me is this new companion,
Mm.
and it's an invisible companion that I can tell you about, but I can't share it with you. You can't feel my symptoms. I can tell you about it. David Foster Wallace has this quote: "How can I have all of this inside me, but to you it's just words?" And so there's just this unshareable nature in some aspects of this experience, and that chronic becomes the new companion, and I take it wherever I go, and it changes possibilities, it changes kind of future thoughts, dreams, wishes. It really gets into how we perceive our sense of freedom, our sense of free will. It brings into kind of focus a lot of health anxiety, but it's not just health anxiety, but it's death anxiety. It's this the finitude. It feels as though that death is closer in some ways, even when it's not. But because
Mm.
we're feeling our fragility of the human condition. And the human condition was fragile to begin with. But when you're feeling it on an everyday basis, the meaning of life kind of takes on a different shape. And
Wow.
it does,
That make a lot of
hopefully,
sense. I like how you actually, you know, humanized it.
yes.
You connected it so well where you feel the empathy. Can you take us back to like a moment when you realized like your illness was actually impacting your identity?
It hit me very hard. Uh, the breaks, it was kind of like the different breaks, and this is something that only the chronically ill would know, would be the defeats of walking out of so many different doctors' offices.
Mm,
Because when you're ill, a doctor's appointment, it feels like Christmas. It feels like someone's gonna understand me. It's like somebody's gonna get me. You have this new doctor, this new specialist, and there's this hope, there's this potential, and it's like you're excited. Oh, she, yeah, like they're specialists. They're going to get it. I'm going to be seen. They're going to fix it. They're going to say, I know what you have and I can fix it. And I had so many appointments of walking out of that appointment, walking to the car, and feeling completely lost, completely disappointed, for me, the word is demoralized, where you
mm.
kind of lose all the wind in your sails and you just don't know what the next direction is. The compass is spinning and you don't know where to go because you had put all of these hopes and dreams into this one doctor that they would get it, and they didn't get it. And you didn't feel seen, you didn't feel understood. So it was those repeated events where they either said I was anxious or they just treated, they didn't, because I wouldn't argue, but I would tell them it's systemic. It's kind of like I feel it I have symptoms from my head all the way down to my toe and everything in between. And they would go like, okay, so let's just focus on this body part. And I'm just like, that's not the story. That's not the issue. It's kind of like the whole forest is on fire and you're concerned about this one tree. It's like we need to
Mm.
look bigger. We need to look bigger. And they
So you
really
felt
weren't looking bigger.
unseen and unheard.
Absolutely.
Oh
And it
my
didn't feel
God.
good because trust me, I'm an anxious person. I raised my hand for that. I know what anxiety feels like.
Hmm.
I'm very accustomed to that. That's not an unfamiliar feeling. And trust me, like this alarm that's going off in my body and everything that's going on, it's like, this is not anxiety. This is something very unfamiliar. And it's so unfamiliar that I give these kind of words and it's this piecemeal, but like the whole story can't even be, described, thoroughly because it's just chaos, pure chaos.
How do you help your clients separate their identity from their illness?
One is acknowledging the unsolvable, acknowledging what can not be solved and what really has to be kind of grieved, because everyone,
Hmm.
including myself, we want to go back. We want to go back to when we felt good and we felt healthy, when things were right and all and everything else. But it's, no matter what, if you shatter something, it's really never going to be the same. And so it's like, trust me, if someone comes across a way for me to get back and to kind of make some different changes and some different choices and all the rest, please let me know. But as far as I know, you can't go back. And you have to surrender a little bit to what has happened. The story has altered, the story has changed, and you have to grieve certain things and set down certain things so that you can
Hmm.
find what exists right now. What are we working with in the here and now? Because that's what it is for me. It is the here and now because that's where our freedom is. That's where our free will is. It's kind of, for me, it's like the old version of me didn't need me. Okay. The future version of me needed me. And the only person that
Mm.
could have any impact on that was my present me. And so I had to be in control but to but that doesn't mean, and sometimes I'll use different stoic language and stoic quotes as just like, okay, this is a particular skill, but I had a I had to I had to cry 1,000 tears. I had to I ended up writing poetry. I had never written poetry in my entire life. It's like
Mm,
but it's like I had to be able to find different modalities of expression. And it was through that writing, which then kind of resulted in me writing poetry books, and they're really just my journals. I can't, it's like those were my journals, and then inspired me to write two journals to kind of help people organize their own thoughts and their own experiences. One's called Breath Between Battles, the other one's called The Expanded Life, and then also my podcast that I created, which is to have a continued voice to exercise whatever freedom that I had, and so that I could find a purpose, and a purpose being three different parts for me. One, a direction. It's passion is like, oh, I enjoy this thing. Okay, but is there a direction? You may enjoy playing video games, but that's not a purpose. And so I needed a direction, and I needed steps that I could move towards that direction. And for me, it had to also end with something greater than myself. I had to serve
mm.
other people. My nature, I'm a caregiver by nature. I serve other people by nature. And that is my, so it was the three steps of the purpose of direction, the action, and the service to others was ultimately, and that's what I encourage. But when I say others, hey, someone could be listening to this. It's like, I'm just sitting here in bed and I have a tough time getting out of bed. Service to others could be texting your friend. It could be taking care of your cat. It could be taking care of the
Yes.
flower next to you. Service to others it's everything that's available, and it doesn't have to be grand. People always get caught up in grand, that it has to be impressive, but small is beautiful. Small is absolutely beautiful, and small is meaningful.
That is so true. Oh my goodness. I love how you put that all together into words. And so you wrote two books. You wrote, actually, your journals are poetry, correct?
I have two just poetry books, and I don't, and it's like I wouldn't even tell anyone to even buy them. I was just like, that's just me screaming into the void. That's kind of like,
Okay.
it's like if you want to hear me screaming into the void in a very imperfect way, in a messy way, that's just me screaming into the void. But it was a kind of a container for my screams. They were just kind of split because talking to people throughout my entire life, adult life, I'm used to kind of thinking in pieces. I'm used to think. I don't think in prose. I think, I don't think in a story. I think in pieces. And
Okay.
poetry is just like a piece, a piece. And so I'm having this conversation with myself where I'm expressing. And then I like the ideas of journal, because I was on Blue Sky Social, and they would have challenges, right? Like, oh, here's a word, and that word would then inspire some poetry. And I'm just like, oh, I would like to inspire people to write as well. And because I'm not that person who I believe that I have the answer that like fits everybody.
Right.
And I like to have this thing where I'm asking questions where people can find their own story. It's like I've never healed anybody in my entire life, 2.5 decades, but I try to show people how they can try to heal themselves, and what they can do for them. And I am the editor of the story, and I help them edit their own story. So the story that fits their reality right now, that feels as though they have more potential, because potential matters, and the feeling of potential matters tremendously. I think I
So
heard
it
it one
sounds like
time.
you used your poetry as a creative expression.
Yes.
And so with that, you did publish those, correct?
I published them. I have a children's book that I did a long time ago through a publisher, and this is like I like the immediacy of just I can just self-publish on Amazon. I can just
Okay.
go like snap a finger and boom, it's there. Trust me, it's like I don't think my sales would pay for a tank of gas nowadays. It's kind of like it wasn't about something to market, something that needed to be. It was just things that I needed to create. My mom liked to do needlepoint. She liked to paint. She wasn't selling all that stuff. She was just creating because she wanted to create. And I described the poetry, the stuff that I did. I even did 3 coloring books because I was just wondering, I wonder if I can do a coloring book. And it was just out of curiosity. And I end up making 3 coloring books. One has to do with, getting IVs because that's, getting IVs and doing infusions and, dealing with an
Mm.
immune system. One has to do with depression, anxiety, and the other one had to do with living with chronic pain. And it was just things that I understood and things that I related to. But it was this curiosity, but that curiosity is a piece that just allows me to expand a little bit. It's kind of like, oh, like, I'm still the person with the chronic illness. I'm still this person, but now I'm also someone that has 3 coloring books. I think that's funny. I think it's like, I haven't sold many of them, but it's kind of like, I think it's funny that I made 3 coloring books, and that I was able to write some poetry and I was able to write this. And I have a podcast and I've done like 35 solo episodes or so. And it's like, but that's what it is. It's trying to expand my story, even when the story becomes limited and even when the story becomes very different than what you expected. That there is still more to the story if you're paying attention and if you're aware of who you are. If you're aware of your thoughts and your resources, you have to be able to be aware. Does that make
It's interesting. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And you lamented through your creative expression into
yes.
these poetic, books. And I find it very fascinating that you created that, and I wouldn't minimize it definitely because people can pick it up and relate to your
They might.
lamenting. You know what I mean? Because to be able to say, "Oh my God, I can relate," is so huge. It make you feel like you're not isolated. It reminds me of when in the Bible, when David was, if you know the Book of Psalms, he's lamenting a lot, and he's
Yes.
expressing. It's an expression of how he's relating to God, and you're lamenting in your poetry is an expression of how you relating to this chronic illness and other
Yes.
people that have chronic illness can also relate to that as well. I think I find it very fascinating to share that. I would definitely share that on in the comments in the video because I think it's helpful to people look for to be able to relate more than
Hmm.
anything. Like we have so many books out here, but to really find someone use their creative expression in that way it's a beautiful thing. I found it to be beautiful and I commend you for that because
Well, thank you very much.
you could have totally shut down but you moved forward in what
I
you were
had to
doing.
keep swimming in the existential sea.
Hmm.
And sea also comes from an old Germanic word for soul. And so it's kind of like I was just and the soul matters. And that's one of the things that I'm a big fan of Thomas More. He has a book called Soul Care. One of my favorite books throughout the journey was Dark Nights of the Soul. I would definitely recommend that to anyone who's kind of going through it. And they're not a lot of, it's not a, well, here you go, here are the answers. It's the wisdom of all the people that came from us, came before us, and that they too, were going through these difficult times and they were looking for wisdom. And you talk about the Bible, it's kind of like God uses broken people. Everyone is like imperfect. All the big names in the Bible, they're all imperfect. and they're all imperfect.
Yes.
So if you're sitting there and going like, "Oh, I'm feeling imperfect," well, it's like, you could read the Bible because it's going to be a story of a whole lot of imperfect people trying to do
Yes.
things here.
That is so true. And so when I picture you doing like chronic, helping people with chronic pain, and you have your background in psychotherapy, you know, they come to you, I'm sure, full of complaints
Yes.
and their mood. What is their mood like when they sit in your office, and how are they when they leave?
Well, it's kind of I'm always a believer of, when it comes to a crayon box, we use all the crayons in the crayon box. We use all of them, and we don't get rid of any of them. So if they are negative, I'd say, hey, we're not. And they're like, I need to get rid of these negative thoughts. I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need to get rid of these negative thoughts. They get to stay. They're a part of you. You need to listen to what these negative thoughts. We need to learn from these negative thoughts, but we also need to give them a place, and we need to give them companions of all these other thoughts as well, and that we aren't just stuck in that place of negativity. Something did happen, and that you're allowed to be human. You're allowed to be sad. You're allowed to grieve. You're allowed to be demoralized. You're allowed to be frustrated. You're allowed to have these feelings. So one of my favorite words, it's kind of is allowing. I do these guided meditations for sleep, and the focus is like, so what do you do? It's like, I allow people to feel whatever they're feeling and not to fight it. And it's just like allow people to kind of feel what they're feeling, and that's going to be some of it, because there isn't like anything that just puts
Right.
everything together. So we have to kind of humanize that experience, and we don't want to make it separate, like, because we don't want to create like, oh, you have to be, we have to keep these thoughts positive, and we have to keep them always upbeat. We have to, no, it's like we want everything, everything, everything. But do you even know what the positive is in your life? Are you familiar with those other crayons? Are those ever kind of getting used? Do those ever kind of get incorporated with how you see yourself and how you see what the future may hold for you? And so again, we don't have to take care. And so it's about lowering that volume of some of that negativity and being able to kind of sit with it, because we want to be able to feel it. It's kind of like the dose. It's like you're making a meal. It's like, hey, you want some salt, but you don't dump all of the salt in, because then you're just only going to taste the salt. So we want to sit with it, but we don't want to ruminate about it. The
Mm,
rumination is just the practice of misery, and you're just chasing
yes.
your own tail. And so we don't want rumination, but we do want expression. We do want you to, it could be structured worrying, as an example. It's kind of like, I want you to sit with this, but I need you to say that there's a time and place for this, and you can go to it every single day, but you don't want it to dominate everything, because then you will only see life through that lens. You won't see life through any other lenses. And so that you'll feel as though that there are no other options or possibilities for your life, if you're only seeing it through that negative thought, through the unfairness, the unjustness. And yes, it's absolutely unfair, unjust, and it can just suck, to have a chronic illness. We're not trying to pretend that it's, that everything is just this
Right.
magical kind of gift. But while we're here, what meaning can we get from this? What is it that that you can learn about yourself? It's kind of the idea of, wow, like those feelings must be so heavy, so heavy. I wonder how strong that person has to be to carry those heavy feelings. Are you aware of how strong you are, to be able to carry those heavy feelings? There's those two things that kind of go together. And people sometimes don't recognize their strengths and abilities because they're so focused on what hurts the most.
That's true. That is so true. So, uh, let's walk out an example.
Let me see what I
Let's
can
say
do here.
someone have a negative thought that they'll never be successful.
Never be successful. Well, it's kind of, and it's funny because the trap that I get into my mind is I almost want to go into this like CBT, aspect of like when you go like, well, what's the evidence for that? What's the evidence against that? But it's like I would kind of go in that direction, but I would go in that direction into much more of this conversation, and not necessarily what they would call like the thought record that they would use. And I don't try to kind of quantify things like how much do you believe that from 1 to 10, and how much what thought distortion that is. But it would be this unfolding of one, like what is success? Kind of breaking it down. Like what do you mean? Like what would success look like for you? Because we want to make sure that we're aiming for something that is achievable. It's like I'm 50 years old. It's kind of like, and I don't play golf. Okay. And I've never really played golf. Success should not be like getting on the PGA tour. Okay. That like, that's not going to happen. you know you want to have goals, but you want to have achievable goals, and because you can easily set up goals that just turn into punishments. It's like, oh, I'll never be able to do
Yes.
X, Y, and Z. But it's kind of like, yeah, and you never probably could, and maybe you can't now because of the illness or an injury or whatever it is. But you're taking away, because remember I said like you have to have a direction, but then you need to have action. Well, you've evaporated any action that you can possibly take because now you've set up this, unachievable goal. And so I want the story of what success kind of looks like for them. And I would also kind of walk through the grief of why that they would even kind of feel like they couldn't at all. Like what has changed where they kind of perceive themselves as being kind of hopeless and helpless. Hopeless is that nothing's going to improve in their life. Helpless is that there's nothing that they can do in their life.
Mm.
And so I'm kind of tending to the garden of hope in
Okay.
this place. And I'm trying to expand out what is their perception of hope. What is it that they can control? Because a lot of people, they may come to me, it's 11 o'clock in the day, and it's like, have you done anything with the day? It's like, no, I haven't done anything. I haven't done anything at all. But it's like I'm looking at them, and it's like the hair is done, they're dressed. It's like, did you feed yourself? Did you take a shower? Did you do this? Did you? They probably did 100 different things, but it was not part of their story at all.
Mm.
And so that they were just unaware, and they had no awareness of what they could do. They had no awareness that talking to me and seeing me and hearing me, was something that they possessed as a power. And I'm just like, hey, and they will often sometimes say, not often, sometimes they'll say, "Yeah, well, it's just hearing, seeing, and talking." I'm like, I'm just hearing, seeing, talking. I'm charging you. It's kind of like, that's my business, is to
Right,
hear,
right.
see, and talk, and to be able to think. And so, and that's that gentle expansion of like having a realistic, goal of something that they want to achieve that would kind of define success, to be able to grieve some elements that may not be realistic, because I don't want to sit here and try to pretend that I can solve the unsolvable. Some things
Hmm.
are unsolvable, and they just are, and we have to be able to grieve. I would love, like my kids to be like, 6 and 7 again. That would be wonderful. I got teenagers, and it's not the same. It's and
Right.
so there's things that just cannot be solved. And so, and then I would want to help walk them through this gentle expansion of possibilities, of their awareness of their story. Because I love just the word story, because people can relate to the word story. And we are stories, and so much of life
Hmm.
around us is a story. And how is their story expanding, and how is it expanding in a direction in which that they would feel, it would feel meaningful, it would feel significant, and that they would feel successful. Because you're not going to just kind of like feel success, but is there a
Right.
possibility of success based on something that is going to be, I love the term self-compassionate. You need to have self-compassion, which is, for me, is kindness and fairness. Is that fair? Is that fair for you to say that, that you can never kind of have success? Is it fair to you just to completely ignore everything that you're capable of, the here and now? Because one of the things that we have to do is to be able to evolve. And we have to evolve as humans. We have different circumstances. Some things we can control, some things we can't control. And how do we take the pieces of life? Because, people are coming to me with broken pieces of life, and we're trying to make a mosaic out of it. We're trying to make something
Mm.
beautiful out of these broken pieces that, again, doesn't mean anything to me, but means something to them because it's their story and that they feel like they created it.
Absolutely. And so, if someone wants to see you, what is your onboarding process?
They would go to drbone.live, that's DRBONE.live, and you can email me directly from that site, and I would be able to get back to you and give you a call. We'd have a conversation to see if I would be the right person for them.
Okay. And we will have that information, of course, in the
Well, thank you
video
very
as well.
much.
So we always put the links in the video of how to reach you and everything that about you in the video. So we'll have that. And so what if you can give the audience and leave them with one piece of advice, what would it be?
That there is potential in very different and imperfect circumstances. And it's okay not to know what it is, but when you don't know and when you feel lost, ask for help. And it doesn't have to be through, it doesn't have to be through a coach or a therapist or somebody. It could be through a friend. It can be through the church. It can be through, look for the community, look for the solidarity, look for other people, and maybe even people online that you may be coming across. And now, obviously, there's certain people that are more familiar, such as the coaches, and we're familiar with that process. But at the end of the day, when you feel like the potential feels impossible, reach out for help, because there are lots of people in this world who are in this world because they like to help and they want to help, and you don't have to do it all by yourself.
That is so true. Thank you so much, Dr. Jeffrey Bone. I
Well, thank
enjoyed
you.
our conversation. You do an amazing job of
Well, thank you very much.
not just sharing not just telling the story, but you really show the story.
Oh,
And
thank you.
that's
I try
amazing.
to
And
live.
that's not an easy thing to do.
I try to be authentic. It's the authenticity.
I could tell. I could tell.
It's there's nothing to do with education or degrees or anything like that.
Mhm.
It's just, are you comfortable just being, yourself? It's the wisdom. It's the wisdom of life.
And you could tell because you showed that as you telling the story, you're showing almost where you are and where you've been, and I love it. I can actually feel the compassion and the purpose in your life. So thank you
Well,
so
thank you
much for
very much.
sharing all that you share with us today. And to the audience, we just truly love sharing information. We love sharing interviews so you can get a chance to see who's out there doing what. And reach out to Dr. Jeffrey Bone if you have chronic illness and you really want someone that can relate and feel seen and heard. Please reach out to him. I will have his information in the comment section. Share it, comment, and subscribe. We always have amazing people on. So until then, have a fantastic Monday. It's your time to shine. Your journey to chart. Coach
Coach Rice wisdom will heal every heart. So join us now. Let's make life suffice. Welcome to my